Welcome to Hockey Night in Canada Online. I'm your host, Rob Pizzo. We have got plenty to go through over the next 10 or 15 minutes. A very eventful weekend in the world of hockey. Before we do that, and before we welcome our guest to the line, do want to let you know how you can get in contact with us. Plenty of ways to do so. Of course, you could always jump on Twitter at Hockey Night, at Rob Pizzo. Remember to put that hashtag Hockey Night, makes us easier for us to find those questions. Or, of course, you can jump on our Facebook page and leave a question there. Like I said, plenty of hockey news to get through over the next little while, and one man who is right in the middle of all that is going to be our guest today, and let's welcome him to the line. Jim Hughson, Hockey Night in Canada, play-by-play. How are you, Jim?
Doing just great, thanks, Rob. Yeah, it was a busy weekend.
It certainly was, and you're coming off a very busy few weeks in Sochi, too, so you actually get to exhale a little bit before the playoffs. Are you happy about that?
Yeah, it is kind of nice to get back into the routine. It's been fun having a lot of games, but the one blends into another after a while, it's a neat time of year because after the trade deadline on Wednesday, then we're really into the stretch run. There's very important games. It's really interesting to see what teams are going to look like. I think the teams, as well as us, are really interested to see what they look like down the stretch and whether or not they have something to offer come playoff time. And, it's going to be a blink of an eye, and the playoffs will start. So it's a great time of year, and the weather's going to get better, too.
Well,
I hope.
I'm going to hold you to that one, Jim, because it is freezing outside today. But let's get to some of...
It's been winter everywhere, and a sure sign of spring is playoff hockey. So I'm confident that we'll have both.
Thanks a lot. I actually like that piece of news. Before we get to some of the outdoor games, before we get to the trade deadline, and before we get to the Vancouver Canucks, we do have to talk about the Buffalo Sabres. Pulling off the deal we were all waiting for on Friday, sending Ryan Miller and Steve Ott to the team that many people expected, the St. Louis Blues. So that was some of the news that we kind of saw coming. The news we didn't see coming, Pat LaFontaine stepping down the next day as president of hockey operations of the Buffalo Sabres. Just your impressions of this wild weekend for Buffalo.
Well, it's too bad. It looked like the turmoil in Buffalo had settled right down. You know, the waves had gone through, and there was some quiet water there for a bit. But and maybe there still will be. I like some of the direction they're going with the young players and the draft picks that they've got. First and foremost, I really like what St. Louis did. I think it was a given that they needed a goaltender they were confident in. Jarro Halak was very capable of a playoff run, and we've seen it in him before. But his play during the regular seasons in St. Louis has been somewhat uneven. And so I think most people, and including the St. Louis Blues, felt that they needed somebody that the whole team was really confident in going into the playoffs, and that could and should be Ryan Miller. And Steve Ott is a playoff-type performer, although he hasn't been there a lot lately. The kind of gritty play that he offers is perfect for the Stanley Cup playoffs as long as he doesn't take crazy penalties. But he'll be a thorn in the side of somebody in a 5 to 7 game series, and I think that one way or the other, he's going to be noticed when St. Louis is in the playoffs. As for the other part of it, I'm not really sure what's going on with Pat LaFontaine. Great guy and a great hockey guy. This is the second time he's left very quickly after joining an organization in an executive role. The same thing happened on Long Island, although their situation was a little more curious because of all the crazy things going on in their front office. I hope this time it's just that he realized that he really didn't want to do it and wanted to go back to a different job instead of 24/7 being an executive. But I think time will tell what really went on there because the stories haven't truly come out.
Yeah, I think we've got a couple pages missing in this story. Before we move on, though, for lack of a better term, when you see this deal and you see the way St. Louis has played this season, to use a poker term, are they all in getting this trade?
Oh, yeah, because they had to give up a lot. And they probably have to invest a lot if they want to make this a worthwhile deal. If Ryan Miller leaves at the end of the season and they don't win a Stanley Cup, then, as a lot of teams who gamble at this time of year find, when you're all in, that doesn't necessarily mean you win. And at the end of the day, you could look back and say, geez, we paid an awful lot and we don't have the goaltender anymore and we don't have the picks and we don't have the players we gave up. It's okay if you win a Stanley Cup because it's pretty satisfying. So, yeah, it is all in for St. Louis, and I think they're probably finished now, but they're going to be a handful, but they're in a conference that there's no lock, there's no dead lock cinch to win in the playoffs either.
All right, let's move on. And every time I talk about this over the last couple of days, I feel like it's Groundhog Day or deja vu or however you want to describe it. Goaltending controversy in Vancouver. Tell me you haven't heard that before. We've got a question coming in on Facebook from Jesse Kirk saying, how bad do you feel for Lack? Not even his fault to get caught up in this goalie drama. Of course, Eddie Lack getting the start over Roberto Luongo at the Heritage Classic. And the fans surely let the Vancouver Canucks know they weren't too pleased with the decision. What are your impressions of what's going on in Vancouver?
Well, Jesse, sometimes I think that we as observers and fans of the game get a little more emotional than some of the people involved in it because we watch it and we're passionate fans. For a lot of the time for the players, excuse me, it's simply business, and the coach has to make a decision who plays goal, and the guy who doesn't play, that's your job to accept that and sit on the end of the bench. This one, however, is different because of what Roberto Luongo went through and because of what it triggers in the community and how many questions are asked and what it. So I don't feel badly for Eddie Lack. I just feel that he was put into a position that, and so was Roberto Luongo, that didn't need to happen. When the New Jersey Devils made a decision at Yankee Stadium for their outdoor game to play Martin Brodeur, it was based on sentiment, not logic, because the better goaltender had been Corey Schneider. And it backfired. It blew up in their face, and they got blown out. This wasn't the case. Roberto Luongo hadn't been playing really poorly. Even though he'd lost some games coming into the Olympic break, he hadn't played really poorly. The team had. And so there was no real reason to invite this controversy, and John Tortorella surely knew what it was going to trigger when he made the decision. I just think they had enough going on without having that happen as well.
Yeah, basically a can of worms that just didn't need to be opened?
Exactly.
All right, let's move on. And actually, let's continue talking a little bit about the Heritage Classic, because I know you were, along the side of the rink there. And the one thing that really interested me, we've heard about the different conditions of every outdoor game, whether it's too cold affecting the ice, whether we've got precipitation the way we saw at Soldier Field. But when I saw Kessler talking to Andy Petrillo saying, it feels like a sauna in here, I thought, is this not an outdoor game? I know the roof was closed because of the rain, but was it really that hot?
Well, it wasn't where I was. I mean, I was wearing an overcoat, but I can see if you were playing in the game how it would have been. Not so much the warmth, but the humidity, just because you've got 54,000 people basically under a tarp. So they weren't able to open up and circulate any air in there. Yeah. And the players had been in the day before, and it had actually been quite chilly with the roof open, and it felt more like an outdoor game. So I can see that there was a real difference there. But, I mean, that's life. In fact, I think some people were disappointed, and I think we all were, that the roof wasn't open. But in this case, it saved the game, because had it been an open-air stadium, it would have been very much like Pittsburgh a few years ago. There would have been so much rain, I'm not sure they would have been able to play the game.
Let's continue talking about the Heritage Classic, because it wasn't just the goalie controversy that took some of the headlines. We had a pretty big injury in regards to the Vancouver Canucks. Let's go to Twitter, and this is a question regarding Daniel Sedin. Is there an update on him? Just your thoughts on what happened with Daniel, the injury, and how big is this for Vancouver?
Well, I guess we'll find out soon enough just how serious the injury is, and it looked like it's not just a day-to-day thing for Daniel Sedin when it happened. I don't know if he caught a rut. The ice looked like it was pretty good. It was a clean hit by Mark Methot, but he got stretched out, and it looked like, from my uneducated eye, like a hamstring injury.
Yeah.
And he had so much trouble getting off and getting to the dressing room that it makes me think that this is not just an overnight injury. It really affects the Vancouver Canucks, even though Daniel hadn't scored since the 30th of December. Fact of the matter is they're not very deep up front, and everybody has to move up. All their lines have to be altered. The Sedins and Alex Burrows obviously can't play together if he's not there. The length of the injury affects what they might do at the trading deadline. It affects how they perceive themselves as playoff contenders. There's so many ramifications to an injury, especially 2 days before, or 3 days in this case, before the trade deadline, that I'm sure there's lots of discussion going on in the Vancouver Canucks management offices today about where they're at. And first of all, they got to get Daniel in there probably today right away and find out what's gone on, how serious the injury is, and then make some decisions. So it has some real ramifications to not only the trading deadline, but to the Vancouver Canucks and the rest of their season.
Well, speaking of the trade deadline, that's where we're going to go next, because we've got a Facebook question coming in from Ashley Barons regarding it. She says the trade deadline always comes and goes, and it's a snooze fest. Will this year be any different?
Well, we all have to put our head on the pillow and watch and find out, Ashley, because you never really know. A couple of days in advance of it, I think that there's enough things going on and there's enough smoke that I think that there might be some fire this year, because there are some unrestricted free agents around. And so, you know, if Ryan Callahan doesn't sign in New York, for example, there's a big deal to be made. If the Vancouver Canucks do go ahead and deal Ryan Kessler, even though he's not an unrestricted free agent, there's, you know, that's going to be a big hockey deal. There are a few of those players around that look like they are in play, as we always say at this time of year, that make you think that there will be some deals. And beyond that, the other thing that I always look at is, in the standings, are there teams that really can look at the situation and think we can go all in and maybe win this? This just as St. Louis did with their earlier deal. There are a few teams in the West that probably think they can win it, that want, maybe it's not maybe a huge deal, but a big enough deal to make them a real contender. The Los Angeles Kings, for example, need to get a scorer. They really need some help to score a couple of goals, and they've got the depth in their organization to make that kind of deal. So I think you'll see them do that. Anaheim looks like they're as good a team as there is in the league, and they want probably to do something to give them insurance as they go on through the playoffs. You know, and there's Chicago. There's enough contenders in the West, and there's enough teams in the East that are just trying to get into that playoff group that make you think that there will be some deals, because teams want to move up and feel that they've got a real opportunity to get some extra gates in the playoffs if they do.
It's interesting, Jim, though, when you look at the teams this year and you look at the standings, I find this year more than others, it's difficult to figure out, even 2 days before the deadline, who the buyers are and who the sellers are. There are certain teams that are right on that cusp that I don't even think they know leading up to the deadline.
Yeah, they'd have to wait a couple more games, but if you're in a position right now that you're looking at your team and you're not sure, it tells me you're probably not.
Yeah, that's
if you're right on the edge of it and you don't know what your team's like right now, then you're probably not going to do an awful lot in the playoffs, and probably shouldn't mortgage the future just to get in. I think a lot of teams do too much of that, and sometimes it's job preservation that gets teams to do that. They feel they have to get into the playoffs, so they give up too much. Canadian teams have always done that. They give up a couple of draft picks that could be very important to them just to get in the 8th spot, to get slapped aside in the first round, and then sit for the summer wondering, geez, should I have done that? Should I have given up those draft picks? And you don't notice it right away, but you do 5 years later when there are no prospects playing on the farm that have any hope of playing in the National Hockey League. So sometimes you're better off to just sit tight, keep your draft picks, and let the chips fall where they may, because if you don't know where your team's at after 60 games, they're probably not where you want them to be.
Well, the picture will be a lot clearer come 3 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. Jim, thanks so much for doing this. We really appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, see you, Rob.
Big thanks to Jim. And remember, different ways to contact us. We want to know the topics you want to discuss. And here are the ways. Jump on Twitter at Hockey Night, at Rob Pizzo with the hashtag Hockey Night, or jump on our Facebook page, Hockey Night in Canada. For Jim Hughson, I'm Rob Pizzo. Thanks a lot for watching. This has been Hockey Night Online.